Memphis is definitely underplayed as a huge music city.
Most places that I've been to, like cities, like a lot of stuff was like closed by like after like 6, and it's kind of cool. Like the music, like they would keep these places open so people can like walk in and kind of have conversations and kind of get to listen to like the Memphis like sound.
The restaurants that we went to, every single place was playing live music.
Yeah, but even on the outsides and like most of the signs for restaurants, it would be like a guitar or a music note or something along those lines. So it was definitely just surrounded by music.
Today we went to the Lorraine Motel, which was the location where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. To actually go into the room as it really was, that they say this is how the room was left after Dr. King was shot, to kind of just stand there in that and be in that ambiance, it made it all much more real. From the outside we got to see the front entrance to his room, 306 and 307, and then inside the museums it kind of gave the story from like the foundations of America imbued with slavery all the way to the present day fights around the world for civil rights and equality.
We went to the Rock and Soul Museum. This museum had more memorabilia, per se, like more actual the guitars, a lot more outfits. It kind of had a focus on the way that white performers kind of started to use the black sound and like how it morphed into rock. And so there was more of a emphasis placed on Elvis and other such artists. And it was interesting, and prior to that in the class we had read about it, but I hadn't really seen too much about it on the trip yet.
Having Professor Gelman here, I know a specific instance was when we visited the Civil and Human Rights Museum in Atlanta. Dr. Gelman had never been there before, so to hear her reactions and kind of her being on the same par as we are in terms of never seen this, it's kind of a shocker, what are your reactions? It just made it a little bit more digestible. You didn't feel like you were just this kid that was being watched by chaperones, but you were there experiencing it alongside.
And the professors, for me it seems, they kind of become on the same level with us in a way. I know Professor Spencer had traveled and made this trip over the summer, but it seemed like he was still new to a lot of it too. Not new to the topic, but new to the experience.
I think having Professor Spencer around has been pretty educational on all of us. And taking it slow through the museums, hanging out in the back of the pack, I would look at him and he's kind of like patting around to the beats, which makes me focus in on him a little bit more and trying to pick out the sounds and making sure that I still understand the music aspect and the number of chords in a string or whatever it might be.
If it was just like me going to the museums myself, like I'd like look around stuff like the exhibits and kind of be like, oh, this is really cool, like in the moment, but like to have them like ask for like reactions really like gets me thinking like in my head, like what are my actual thoughts. So like kind of getting those out and what I felt when I see these exhibits. I think like professors really help you like break down what you're seeing in these museums.
Kind of going into the trip, I was a little uneducated about the civil rights movement, and for example, the Freedom Riders in Anniston, how they kind of risked their lives just by riding a bus and just for the basic human rights. And like I had no idea about that from previous education. Going from different sites and learning about these different events throughout the civil rights movement has really made me more aware for what happened during this time period.
It does in a way make it a lot more real, I would say. In class, you jump from date to date to date, but what you don't really appreciate or understand, something that this trip certainly did for me, all the oppression and all the struggle and kind of the fighting the tooth and nail for every little gain that the civil rights movement and those who were part of it, the amount of struggle and that they had to overcome. You don't really appreciate it until you go to a museum like today.
The moment I guess, on this trip would have been when we were sitting in the 16th Street Baptist Church where there was a bombing and 4 girls were killed. Just sitting in the pews, experiencing it, it made me think that a lot more people need to make such trips to really understand our own history better. Because I feel learning about it, like you said, learning about it is has its merit, but really getting that life-changing experience, I feel like you had to be there, and we were there.